Hello, and welcome back. This video is about importing a static mesh from Blender to Unreal. Now, as this is an Unreal video, I won't go over much of the Blender bits, so some experience there is a good idea. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Thank you for helping me help others. I created this model by following the gamedev.td course linked in the description. I did color it using a different method though. I used a texture and shrank the UVs for each section to a point and moved it to a color. This gradient PNG I'm using is from the KKit packages on itch.io, and a link to their assets is also in the description, and they are much nicer than mine. And with your object selected, you can also go to the shader editor, and you'll see that there is a material here. The default material that you create up here will have the principled BSDF connected to the material output. I just added the texture or image texture here by going to Shift-A, search, right there actually, image texture, and then selecting the color gradient here and dragging the color into the surface. So that's all that's needed here in Blender. With that, we want to export. So first we go into object mode, make sure that our object is selected. I'm going to go to File, Export. FBX is down here, so I'm not going to click that yet. If you're going to do this often, you're going to want to right click, add it to the quick favorites. Once you've done that in here, you can just hit Q and it'll pop up. So it opens up this window. This is the defaults for the export. For the static mesh, we want to select selected objects, mesh, scroll down here and apply transform. In previous versions of either Blender or Unreal, I'm not sure when this changed. You needed to change the forward and the up to x-axis for forward and z-axis for up. I believe both in the positive. So if your model ends up being turned oddly when it gets into Unreal, come back and try exporting again with those settings changed. In geometry here, if you want flat shading like we'll be using, you want to select face. And then armature should not matter because we didn't select it at the top, but later on when you're doing skeletal meshes, you want to uncheck add leaf bones. And again, since it's a static mesh, we do not have animations, so we'll do that. I'm going to export this here as house 01. So with that exported, we move to Unreal. In Unreal, I've created a new third-person blueprint project. So in here, I'm going to create a folder. I'm just going to call this house. In here, we'll go in here. We want to import. We want to find where we saved that FBX. You have a few options here. You can actually drag the file directly into here and it'll import it from that location. You can import it this way, which will effectively be the same thing, or you can copy the file into the directory that represents this by just opening up here in Explorer. We're just going to import it directly from this directory. Once you've done this, this will pop up with a ton of options. For this, the relevant bits are static meshes and materials. We're not doing skeletal animations, and textures might have some stuff. All of this stuff by default should be fine. If you have issues, checking in here might be a good idea. But with that all set, we'll just hit import. That will bring in our static mesh and a material. However, there is no texture. There may be a way to embed it in the FBX, and you used to be able to do that. You maybe still can, but it was a little error prone. So we're just going to do it directly. So same thing though, you saw the files there. I'm going to import again. And in this case, I have my color gradients here. I also created an emissive texture that just has the white section here as emissive. So I'm just going to bring both of those in. And in our material, this is the default. We can just take all this, delete it, hold T and click. That'll add a texture sample. With that selected, you can go down here and grab the texture, search for our gradient, and then that will be RGB. We'll do the emission after. We hit save. That will apply it. So there, it's been updated. We can just drag this into our scene. We hit play, and there we go. Looks nice, but if we try to get to the door, that's odd. So if we go into our static mesh, zoom out a bit, we want to turn on simple collision. And you can see this big boxy thing. Man, moving between Blender and Unreal's movement system is a little bit of a pain. So it has created this very large convex collision polygon, and that's why we couldn't get close to the door. So if you don't like that, there's a few ways to get around it. You could go to collision complexity in here, and then you want to use the complex collision, which is the actual mesh, as simple. And then that should, when we hit play, let us get to the door. That will also, actually let me change this on the character first. And go in here, and add a little super jump action. Change the jump velocity to 1200. And get up here, and get on here. So that's all looking good, and you can go right to the edge because it's using the complex mesh. If we don't want to do that, just revert this back. The other way is back in Blender. So in here, I have my complex house mesh. If I hide that and show the house base, ignore the texturing, it's not important, but it's a very basic mesh. And I also have a roof beam, just that beam. They're two separate objects, but what we can do is we can select one, control click. We have all three selected. I'll hit Q, go into our export, and it has reset this to the defaults. So let's just go through it again. We have selected objects, object type mesh. We want to check apply transform, uncheck animation, and then geometry, face smoothing. And we can just overwrite that file. So then back in Unreal, we go back to our files here. We can just right click the static mesh, go to reimport. Once that is done in our house here, you can see the simple mesh already updated. It looks like it might just be this top part, but you can't see. Oh, you can see here. So the simple mesh is kind of hidden by the complex mesh, but that's it showing it there. You can see another line through here. So the way this works back in Blender is that I have two extra meshes, and they have the same name as the original mesh. That is very important. So it has the name house. This has the name house. It has UCX underscore as a prefix. Case doesn't matter. The UCX is convex, and everything after the period, well, the period and everything after it is kind of ignored. So if you didn't have dot base and dot roof beam here, you just called, well, if you got rid of the periods, imported all three of these, that it would be three separate meshes. So don't do that. There are a few other options for UCX for like a box collider and whatnot. You can find those in the documentation. And as you saw, we have our convex mesh here, but this is not a convex mesh because it has a little dipping area at the top here back in Unreal. You can see that the simple mesh actually ignored that part and it created its own convex mesh from the simple mesh we imported. But it did make this beam separate from the house, which is what we want. So with that done, and we go back in here, we can test again. We can get to the front door. And we also have super jump. The beam is working. One last thing that I forgot is in our material, we want to set up an emissive. So as I showed, you can just hold T and create a texture sample that way. You can also just pop this into a separate window and drag the texture in directly and does the same thing. So with that, you can see our texture here. It's just got that one bit and a little bit on the top left that we're not using. We just drag that into emissive. You can see up in here, it's a little brighter. It's a little hard to see that, but if you dragged RGB down here as well, everything just got emissive. Let's undo that. Once we save that, and then we go and you can see that these things now are look a little brighter. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel, watch these videos 2 weeks early, or just want to download the project files, which this video doesn't actually include, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.